Back to Politics Nation. That was former Wisconsin Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes talking to my friend April Ryan of the Griot about the sense of hope and optimism at last week's Democratic convention in Chicago. He joins me now to elaborate. Mandela, you and I were both at the DNC last week. It was unlike any other convention I had ever experienced. Why do you think there's so much hope in the Democratic Party right now?
Well, let me tell you, you did an amazing job on the DNC floor. This is actually my very first DNC, so I don't have anything to compare it to in person, although we had the 2020, which was virtual. But people should have hope because younger folks have been getting involved. Younger people have been getting engaged, and we've seen this surge of enthusiasm over the last 4 weeks that we could not have anticipated. Folks are showing up out of the woodwork to get involved in this campaign. People who have texted me asking how to get involved who didn't even text me during my own campaign to help make sure that Kamala Harris becomes the next president of the United States. There is something special and there's something very unique happening right now. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to show up to keep that energy moving past November.
Now, your state of Wisconsin is a critical battleground state this election. It's also where the Republican National Convention was held last month. What are you seeing on the ground and hearing from people about this race? You got a tremendous vote when you ran for the U.S. Senate there, so you have your finger on the pulse.
Well, certainly. And I'll tell you that given the fact that the Republican National Convention was in my hometown of Milwaukee, it was hard to tell that something was actually going on when you compare it to the energy that was there in Washington, D.C. Folks have been ostracized in the Republican Party who dared challenge Donald Trump and his lies. That didn't happen at the DNC. And it's also pretty unique if you were to only watch the RNC or to only have seen it before. You would think that former presidents or former party nominees weren't even invited to a convention. On the stage at the Democratic National Convention, you saw former presidents, you saw former nominees, you also saw former challengers, people who were in Kamala Harris's primary when she ran for president before. You didn't see that in the Republican Party. So I say all that to remind people that we are more unified than even I could have imagined. Sometimes it gets a little tough. We're a Big Ten party, a lot of ideas, a lot of different concerns, a lot of different issues. But on the whole, the Democratic Party showed up in full force.
You're part of a group called Democracy Defense Project, a bipartisan leadership team across several states that is working to restore faith in public elections. Can you speak how we got to the point where some people are skeptical about their vote and what your group is doing to combat that misinformation?
Well, I can tell you that there have been lots of folks who are sore losers, people who cannot believe that folks wouldn't think that they're the best candidate for office or that folks would show up or would not show up to vote for them. And these same people have carried their grievances to the next level and have incited folks. And we saw the biggest example of that on January 6th, where the mob stormed the Capitol. But this has been happening in races at almost every level, but we didn't see it come to a head the way that it did until January 6th. And with that being the case, to keep our poll workers safe, to keep candidates safe, the Democracy Defense Project was formed. It is a bipartisan group. I'm proudly joined by the Republican Attorney General here in Wisconsin, former Republican member of Congress, who have stepped up and said that enough is enough. They are going to challenge these false assertions that go on, as I will do the same when folks try to say, or if folks are to say that this election wasn't conducted properly, or this didn't happen, that didn't happen. I have so much respect, and I encourage people who may feel that, or maybe even concerned about the process, to show up and work the polls one day. You can do this. It is available. It is an available opportunity. In fact, most towns, cities, and villages need you to show up to help work the polls. But we've been doing a series of interviews, panel discussions, just getting out there talking to people about the crucial hard work that takes place in polling centers all across Wisconsin, and how election security is a top priority of these election officials. And people should not have to question what goes on when the ballots are counted, because things have been happening pretty accurately and fairly. And there are Republican or conservative-leaning outlets that have done the research that prove as much.
Now, right now, both the Harris and Trump campaigns have assembled legal teams for post-election results. Meanwhile, Trump's campaign co-manager said earlier this month that the election will not be over until Trump is inaugurated. How seriously do you take all of this, and what would be the implications for the country if there's another extended battle over presidential election results?
Well, I think it's pretty natural to have a legal team in place ready for the ballot counting process, just in case there has to be a challenge. Now, there's nothing wrong with a challenge if the race is incredibly close. And when I say challenge, I mean going through the official channels and calling for a recount. That's totally fine. You should do that. You should put all the hard work into winning a race as you need to, all the effort. But since 2000, I think that the importance of doing so has become even more apparent. And also given the fact that we have a former president who got on stage and still gets on stage, still lies as if it were November of 2020, a person who still has not let that go, the fact that he was soundly rejected by the American people. And so having the legal team in place makes sure that things aren't going awry, and that if there are questions and concerns that people have, that those concerns can be assuaged.
All right. Thank you for being with us, former Wisconsin Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Up next, my final thoughts. Stay with us.